With Doug Elix, and last year it was Andrew Liveris, the Chairman and President CEO of Dow. And this year we've got a lovely combination, very complementary combination of Bruce and Amelia. Tomorrow is Australia Day. I wish you all, my fellow citizens, a happy Australia Day tomorrow.
But my path to Cold Spring Harbor was really grounded in the great education that I received in Australia. I was the first in my family to go to university, and I did so on an Australian Commonwealth University scholarship, without which I probably would not have gone to university. The Australian education system accommodated my early interest in science and medicine while still exposing me to broad knowledge outside of those areas, including history, which happened to be my favourite subject and still is. The education system in the schools challenged me, but allowed me the freedom of choice and freedom of inquiry. It's also a system that we should cherish and nurture, because I think this system is the future of Australia. In many ways, Australian science pulls far beyond its per capita weight, but it could do a lot better. Australia spends only 1.7% of GDP, which is about the same as Britain now, but compared to 2.7% in the United States and 3.3% in Sweden, which has half the population of Australia. Unlike Britain, which is undergoing an economic austerity program at the moment and is cutting back, Australian budget has been buoyed by the massive ore deposits and the export of raw materials, mainly to China. We should invest it, I think, in research and development. This increased funding should be accompanied by a strategic move to create innovation centres that surround some of the research-intensive universities in Australia, with the sole purpose to mix research and development in different fields, making connections between these fields. The research in these innovation centres should involve academia, but particularly bringing into these centres employees from industry who could work with students and professors together across different fields. Startup companies will emerge from these and these combined efforts. So Australia could have an incredibly bright future, contributing to major advances in producing sustainable energy resources, producing food in increasingly difficult environments of growing food, and in making advances in human and animal health. So what I'd like to end with and suggest is that on this Australia Day, and in fact it is Australia Day in Australia now, we recognise that what is really great about Australia, which has often been called the lucky country, but I hope Australia in the future is called the innovation country. So happy Australia Day. Thank you.
But while getting to Australia isn't the easiest thing in the world, that's actually precisely the journey that I want to focus on today. I want to posit that Australia's distance is not a pitfall, or at least not exclusively a pitfall, but also a unique privilege, and that our country's unique interplay of history and geography, our status as this pristine island at the end of the world, is in itself a rather profound privilege of Australian citizenship. Every Australian originally came from somewhere else. And it's in fact this sense of distance or even displacement that I think has imbued the Australian character with a quite unique set of traits, which I've only really come to realise and appreciate in the 12 years that I've spent away from it. I want to posit that to be an Australian today means to possess an identity that's inherently elastic, that's defined by a sense of possibility, adventure, even daring. And I say this simply because anyone who decided to make that journey in the first place, to start a new life in a country from which you can see no other country, has to be pretty determined to do so. But we come from a nation of risk takers, built by those who were drawn to the land at the end of the world. Our history explains why so many Australians remain so outward looking. It's why there are, in fact, so many expats. Australians have never felt like where they grew up was all there was. They could never think that. We've never assumed that the Australian way was always the right way. The attitude is instead, why not see how they do things elsewhere? It's why successive generations of young Australians have felt brave enough to make the leap in reverse and experience the world for themselves, often for very long periods. Interestingly, this has remained true even as the country's economic standing over the past 2 decades has moved it from a peripheral to a central place in world affairs. It's not just the sheer size of the United States which produces this difference. It's also that we are a young country, even younger than the one we're in right now, and we're almost entirely unencumbered by tradition. And in our manners, I believe we are as democratic and as Republican as they come. I suppose it has both its positive and negative implications, but the reason why Australians travel so widely and with such hunger has to do with the flexibility of our national ties. You meet an Australian everywhere you go. I'm certainly dismayed that the novelty of being an Australian in New York is not what it once was. We cross the world now in the back of 747s because of the bold journeys on which our families embarked. We understand that our nation is shaped not by fate or by divine providence, but by our own actions and decisions. Australia is a story that is still being told, and I can directly link my own experience overseas to that sense of possibility and promise. I hope we never lose it.
We see opportunities for Australian miners who are looking to do exploration in Chile or to acquire mining assets in Chile and operate. It's a very stable and attractive market to do mining. But on the flip side, for the suppliers to the mining industry, it's obviously a very attractive market. There are almost 80 suppliers to the mining industry who are Australian, who've set up in Chile. There's some very large operations there from the multinationals as well as the state-owned miner called Codelco, which is responsible for about 10% of the world's copper production and is the largest copper miner in the world. There are very strong copper-gold opportunities for miners, and we have approximately 10 Australian juniors already operating in Chile, and obviously BHP and Xstrata and Rio Tinto have a very strong presence in Chile already. One of the really interesting opportunities in Chile, I believe, is the state-owned miner Codelco, which has a very ambitious investment plan of almost $30 billion. The objective there is to maintain production levels amidst a lowering ore grade, and Australian companies are very used to operating in very efficient environments. Codelco is also looking to modernise its operations in line with stricter health, safety, community relations and environmental environments. And Australian suppliers to the mining industry are obviously very adept at working in these types of environments. Australia is very well placed to help Chile with its current water management issues. It's in the 4th year of drought now. It has a very strong agricultural industry, a strong mining industry, and Australia has tackled a lot of the issues that Chile is currently facing. And the Chilean government is really looking to assistance on a policy level with industry support and also for just some general expertise from Australia. The level of research and development in Chile is surprisingly low at the moment, and so the Chilean government is trying to kickstart that process and has opened up a program of Centres of Excellence, which an Australian organisation, CSIRO, has been the first Australian to be successful in winning one of those for mineral processing, and we expect there to be many more Centres of Excellence with Australian participation in the future. The Chilean market is very open from an architectural point of view, but culturally it is a very tightly knit community, and so getting access to decision makers it can be challenging for Australians. What Austrade offers Australian industry is a way to accelerate that process of getting involved in the local business community, and the badge of government really helps in a country like Chile.